definitely on fire. Sarah, if
Yes.
you could, if I forget to say it or echo it in the chat for people to set their chat to everyone instead of hosts and panelists. Really happening now. Yeah. Welcome, Lori. Hello, Mike. Hello, Stephanie. Hello, Hannah from Duluth. So beautiful in Duluth. Do you have snow yet? Hello, Jody. Oh, happy Monday. Monday in all caps.
Oh my God, it's not Friday. It's Monday.
I'm glad you wrote that because I actually didn't know what day it was. Okay, not so much snow. Yeah, okay, good. Hello, Bridget. I agree. When you wrote Monday, I was like, oh yeah, that's just where we're at today. Mary. Hello, Mary. We're going to give our friends just another minute to pop in. The lunchtime is always great for just one more minute on that microwave meal, you know, and then we'll be ready to go. Welcome, Nina. We'll wait 30 more seconds, friends, and we're going to jump right in. Yeah, is anyone eating lunch during this? Anyone who knows me knows I love food, hearing about food, looking at food, smelling food. So if you're going to eat during this, feel free to let me know in the chat. What's on your plate today? I agree, Sarah. My brain also feels like it's a Friday. Oh, Chick-fil-A, Matt. Yes. Lemonade.
We had the Popeyes spicy chicken last night.
Oh, nice. Well, hello. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Burnout, from Exhaustion to Empowerment, and how we can heal and recover. I am Teresa. We have met before. I'm pretty sure everyone on here I've had the pleasure of interacting with or meeting in person. So this is fun for me, and hopefully fun for you too. I was debating how to kick us off, and I had kind of a daydream of showing up as disheveled as I feel sometimes and like, welcome to the burnout session, you know, in kind of my best Eeyore kind of way. But I just thought I'd bring a little more Monday burnout energy. I want to start by saying, don't worry. I will not at any point tell you to look at recipes for a rotisserie chicken as a way to cope with your burnout. That if you're like me and you love to read magazines, that's always something that comes up. If you're feeling a little crispy around the edges, if you're exhausted, don't worry. You just need some rotisserie chicken hacks. That is not on our list today. So I just want to set your minds at ease. Our team knows that's one of my pet peeves is the rotisserie chicken hack. Hello and welcome. I am joined in the studio today by my friend and colleague, Nick, who is keeping everything right on track with technology, and offering nice nods and maybe some thumbs up as we go along. And today we have a special guest who will be joining us in the chat, none other than Sarah Noel Wilson herself. But wait, what's that sound? Sarah's here in the studio right now. Here she is. We couldn't resist. We wanted to just end the year with a bang. That's why I'm so excited today. You know, we're in here together. So we've got the A-list crew here holding it down today. A few logistics, friends, as we get started, and you know the drill. We've done this together before. I want you to do what you need to do to be comfortable. Sit, stand, eat your Chick-fil-A, take your shoes off, put your comfy thinking cap on. Do whatever you need to do. I want to encourage you to interact in the chat as much as you can. You can message everyone by making sure you put your chat setting on everyone. You can just private message Sarah and she can ask a question or share something anonymously on your behalf. I know that the topic of burnout carries some risk. So full disclosure, we'll be using Mentee several times in the session so that you can share anonymously, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And as always, we're recording this session, so all of my fun song and dance moves, and maybe Sarah popping over a time or two, will be recorded forever as we get going. So yes, I want to invite you to participate as much as you can and feel up to it. So our roadmap together today, my friends. What is burnout really? It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, and that it does have a technical definition, and I wanted us to zoom out and kind of start with that big picture and then talk about how this manifests and what to do. I learned a ton getting ready for today. A side note, one of the reasons we're offering this topic as part of the webinar series is because we have heard from so many of you, hundreds or maybe thousands, who are experiencing burnout, aren't sure what to do about burnout, want to support your team members in preventing burnout or helping to treat or alleviate some burnout. So that brought us to today. I've learned several things for myself that are helpful. I want to spend some time on the system versus the individual and what is in control of each of those. So hopefully those of you who are leading organizations, leading teams, you'll find both of those avenues helpful. Some strategies for coping and healing. And I also want to give you some time with a guided reflection. Reflection is one of the most powerful tools we have to get on the balcony of our own mind, to really solidify things that you heard today. And it's the most overlooked, right? We just think we can fast forward through it like the closing credits, but oh yeah, this is good, I'm going here. But the time for reflection is like those little nuggets at the end of a Marvel show that they leave. Like you can't leave before they show you the fun scene of the bonus material, right? So we're definitely making time for that today. So my friends, I want to kick us off by going to Mentee. And oops, pardon me, I got a little too happy with my clicker there. And we've used Mentee before in this series, so you can go to mentee.com, you can scan this QR code. I'll come back to those directions in a minute. I mentioned we were leaning into Mentee today a little more than usual. And again, I want to invite you to use the chat as much as you want, and that is as safe of a space as we can make a public chat. How about that? You're very safe with Sarah and I would invite you to keep that safety for one another. But burnout carries some risks. One of the things I often hear when I'm talking to people one-on-one about burnout is the risk that they will be perceived as not being committed to their jobs anymore, not being able to take it, being less than, that they will get passed over, maybe for promotion, for some kind of reward, because they're struggling at this time. And so the reason I wanted to lead into Mentee is because some of you know one another. I wanted you to have a really safe way to share and that we can talk about these things and look for trends within the group. So back we go. So mentee.com, and our code today is 47925037. And our question, when you think about burnout, yes, please, good, keep them rolling. What questions, concerns, and observations do you have? Yeah, good. And since we are so fortunate to have Santa's favorite elf, Sarah Noel Wilson, in the workshop with us today. Sarah, yes. Will you help us? What do you see? What's coming up for you when you look at this list that's coming on?
I really appreciate that. Is it burnout or exhaustion? And how do we differentiate the two? And what's really lovely about that is you're going to be talking a little bit about how exhaustion is a step into burnout. how to get out of it, how to step back without falling further behind. We feel this a lot. We definitely feel this in our world. Learning your limits. Beautiful correction there, which our brain corrects it for you. Concern about how to come back from it, or if it's telling you something needs to change. I think that that's definitely something we see with folks is there might be things that are in your control, and maybe where you're at or who you're with isn't the right situation. Yeah, learning to convey your limits. Like, how do we set those boundaries? And that can be really tricky depending on how you were raised, how you've learned to speak up, because even though it's really great in practice for us to be able to speak our needs, not everyone knows how to receive those needs. Yeah, how do you pull out of it? Are you no longer effective in your job? I feel this.
Yeah. I love this one, clouds the focus on wellness. And I'm thinking about it can cloud the focus on just about everything in your life, right?
Yeah.
That cloudiness, that mental cloudiness.
Oh, we love that. Hard work and value shouldn't be determined by the number of hours put in. But Teresa, to that point, somebody shared like how it spills into other areas of your life, because quite frankly, when stress happens, it's going to show up in every element and aspect of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely true. Let us go to, thank you everyone for your honesty. And thanks for echoing out here, Hannah. Yes, to the last one. Good. Nick, let us bring up, this is the definition of burnout from the World Health Organization. And something that I want to make sure we're clear about is that burnout is not just an American problem. There is evidence of burnout across the globe, and our friends who live in Asia are experiencing burnout that parallels or even exceeds the burnout faced by American workers at this time. So I want to highlight that, because something I know we often hear is people just don't want to work anymore, or conditions of work that seem to be specific to Americans that are actually pretty global. And so the definition from the World Health Organization: chronic stress that develops progressively and eventually becomes chronic, causing health alterations. And I did have a little smirk about the health alterations, because I couldn't think of a single positive health alteration, nor could I find one in the research. Actually, Nick, could we bring that up just one more moment, my friend? Thank you. So I want to dig into a few of these phrases just to draw them out. Chronic stress, something that I found over and over in the literature. Chronic stress means I can't get back to my baseline. I can't get back to a place where I feel comfortable, where I don't feel like my mind and my body are on fire, where I feel like I can actually think, maybe think properly, think as deeply, think as coolly as I want to. And now this was the part I was less familiar with until I was learning more about burnout and doing some research. It develops progressively. Something that I learned about myself in this process, and I'll probably say it a few times during our time together, is that I think, and I don't know that I'm alone here, so you chime in the chat too, I don't pay enough attention about it until I am almost miserable, right? I'm not monitoring my stress periodically. I'm not checking in. And then before I really realize it, it feels so uncomfortable, I can hardly stand it, And so this idea that it develops progressively felt very empowering to me, right? That I could be on the lookout for some things. Yes, 100% Amanda. And yes, feeling crispy. Yes, it's like once you smell it in the oven, it's almost too late, right? And that it can eventually become chronic, causing health alterations. No surprise to anyone else listening, you've probably felt most of these things yourself, but we think about health issues, body issues, pain. Pain can become chronic. Physical health changes in terms of digestion, in terms of heart, mental health. Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, Sarah. Physical, mental, and emotional health, all suffering. So in this health alterations, the PS, the asterisk is there are no positive health outcomes from burnout, from this chronic stress. one key word that I want to share, and this goes back to something that came up in our mentee. Is it exhaustion or is it burnout? And this is an excellent question. Now, human to human, I don't want you to feel any of those things, right? I want you to be having a workload that's sustainable and a life outside of work that is filled with community and working together, right? I don't want you to feel either. But a key word that came up in the research that can help distinguish it is that burnout carries a strong sense of dread. Dread would be a key word. Dread about performing routine tasks, dread about performing even things you're good at, right? That you have lost interest in those things. So a strong sense of dread. And, you know, as humans, dread is not a word we enjoy. That's not a word we want to lean into. And I think that's where things with burnout can become particularly dangerous if we're not really mindful of it, that sense of dread. Sarah, what comes up for you when you think about this definition? What's coming up for you? What's new for you?
Yeah, well, actually was taking me back to the first time that I really experienced burnout from career and working in an organization that was fast paced, right? Like I just look forward to working with a company someday that's like, you know what, we just take it easy. We're really thoughtful about our work. Maybe we just need to create that, Teresa. But the thing that was coming up for me is I didn't realize when I was experiencing burnout how much it impacted my physical health and how much it impacted my mental health until I got out of it. But one of the things that was really unique for me is that it made me question myself. I remember having an incredible amount of doubt. Like I felt like I lost my zhuzh. Is that the it really impacted my sense of confidence because I was just struggling to perform in a way that I wanted to. So but for me, I didn't realize how bad it was until I got out of the situation and into a healthier situation that I realized, oh, that was worse than I realized. Because I think when you're in it, you just tolerate it. And I don't know how that's true for you, Teresa, like, or other people. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon, good. This is helpful regarding dread. Some data from Gartner, 50% of employees don't believe their current effort is sustainable. And, you know, I thank you for sharing that and, you know, taking us to another level, because this is a really key point and something that Sarah and I see as a trend in the clients we're serving, and was something that I ran into quite a bit in literature. But this idea that the workload, like it is known within an organization that the workload is high, that the company is growing. And then there's this flip side of, well, we got to keep headcount down, right? So we're not matching the resources to the need, which is a key element. We're going to go to burnout culture here in a minute, Brandon. And thank you so much for bringing that up. And this is why it matters. You know, first and foremost, we want leaders, people in formal positions of power, to be really mindful of the conditions of burnout, how this affects humans. We have this big misconception that burnout is inevitable, but it isn't, right? It's preventable. And there are certain steps you can take as leaders and as humans to help insulate yourself. So we're going to go there in just a bit. And, you know, things we've heard from clients, and Sarah, you feel free to chime in. A burnout that has existed so long, it's manifested into depression for folks who had never experienced mental health issues before. I'm thinking about one of our very favorite folks of all time who would have enormous episodes of autoimmune issues and fever blisters that were brought on by stress, too many hours, an unsustainable workload, you know, back to your point, Brandon, ongoing digestive issues. So it's a very serious topic that affects, you know, this isn't, as much as we say, leave home at the door or leave work in the door, there's one human, right, doing all of these things. And so we need to be so mindful of the conditions that humans are in. Let's do this, Nick. Let's bring up our burnout culture slide. Oh, this was fascinating to me because we see this regularly, and this list that I found summed it up just perfectly. There are cultures work cultures, organizational cultures, probably family cultures too, but let's zoom out and think about the system for a minute, where burnout is extremely likely. In the literature, I found phrases like burnout factories, centers of burnout. This is the top ingredient list for burnout. And I want to be really mindful and give you, I don't know that any of our friends on this call, whom I have come to love, even via chat very much, this might not be for you, but this might be language you need. The issue with burnout is that folks lose their sense of efficacy. They don't see how to make it better. They don't see how to keep contributing. It is a real erosion of a person and the level of power they feel like they have to contribute, right? So on a whole other level, that's not ideal for a workplace. So lack of autonomy. We think of lack of autonomy, how much control do I have over the work that I'm being given, over how I do my work? You know, I'll give a shout out to Sarah over here. That's something I think she does really well, is create a system where work can get done with a high degree of choice, right? We all know what the end is, but the path to get there can be very flexible. This is probably where we would also think about connections to preference and performance, right? If there are preferences the leader has that are kind of unnecessary to getting the job done, those types of things can erode a sense of autonomy and how work gets done. A lack of fairness. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Hannah, as a takeaway, what can we bring back to our leadership team about burnout? Yes. Yes. Let's keep it going. And please, I invite you, there is so much wisdom in this group. Keep sharing ideas. Maybe you have phrases, maybe something stuck out to you that you're going to take back to your team. Please feel free to share that in the chat so everyone on the call can learn from one another. That would be so helpful. But yes, thank you, Hannah. A lack of fairness, right? A perception that there are favorites, a perception that people in some areas just get better conditions, better resources, better support, they're valued better. So a disconnect about the level of fairness, which that one hit home for me. I can certainly think of a team I worked on where not everyone was treated the same, and it made you feel like you were just hamstering the wheel, right? Like you could just be running forever and there would never be a finish line. Lack of reward. Now we're using the word reward, but I also want to use recognition, right? Because that can be very small moments of being thanked, but this idea that I would put in an extreme amount of effort, that I would be, you know, I'm going back to my friend Brandon, that I would be in that group of 50% who felt like my workload was unsustainable forever. And, you know, these are some ways I've heard this manifest and heard this show up with some of the clients and teams we serve. Here, there's only sprinting. And then just when you think you're exhausted from sprinting, you run a marathon. And then you don't stop after that. You just go back to sprinting. All of that sounds terrible. None of that sounds sustainable, right? I saw another team made me think about, oh, it'll come back to me, but ways that people describe the culture as one that never stops. Because this is another key element. We all have times when there's a big push, the benefits enrollment, you know, the XYZ, the big snowstorm, the fill in the blank for the big thing that, you know, you kind of work toward or you know is always hanging out there. My background is education, right? Like the semester coming to an end. Those are normal things that we might rally for. We might put in some more time. And that doesn't usually create burnout when the pace backs down, right? But this sense of unsustainable workload has come up, and that there is no reward. So there's not a reward of time off at the end. There's not a financial incentive. There's not any kind of recognition coming on the other side of this. It's just relentless. We hear this a lot. And I'm thinking about a team I was with last week regarding workload. For a couple years, we have heard folks on this team say, we're just really busy, we move really fast, there is just an incredible amount of work to be done, and like, this is just the facts of it. And when we started picking some things apart, the leaders said, actually, I don't think that all the work is as important. So for years, they had maintained that all the work was of equal importance and it all had to be done, yesterday. And then we started picking out that actually people in power who could control and influence how others worked, right? And I'm using control in a positive way, like control and maybe insulating, right? That they knew not all the priorities were the same, that they knew not everything had to be done at the pace, but they had just maintained that as the culture kind of by choice. And the solution was, if the team member's overwhelmed, they could come and talk to me and then I'll tell them like the real story behind the priorities. And it also seemed to be kind of an open secret that not everything would even be finished, right? It was like, oh yeah, it's kind of like a project in your house, like painting the shed. Everyone knows the shed's never going to get painted, but let's not keep holding people's feet to the fire about painting the shed. That was kind of how they were operating. So I want to give a big one about unsustainable workload. We hear this all the time. And it's to the point that I say lovingly, I'm just refusing to accept now as an answer that it can't be changed, right? Plans can be changed, things can be scaled. If there must be a push, how can it be more of a temporary push instead of a resetting of the bar? One of my favorite, if you don't follow the Brain Doctor, that's her Instagram, the Brain Doctor. I love her so much. And she said, nowhere else do we expect people to perform at maximum extent all of the time, right? So she used the analogy of a marathon. Like we would never expect a runner to run a marathon every single day, but we expect people to perform their work at that level every single day without a break. Yes, thank you, Sarah, the Brain Doctor. She's pretty fabulous. I've learned quite a bit going out. Yes, Brandon, thank you. The burnout culture themes make me think of neuroscience influence domains. Yes, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. Yes, and thank you for sharing this. I'm going to be looking this up again later myself, and how you can use this language in having a conversation, because people are very, I don't know if it's just easy or eager to kind of brush off issues of burnout as an individual problem without zooming out and saying, in what way might we be fostering burnout? Might we be accelerating burnout, right? That's another way we could think of it, is those ingredients of a burnout culture are accelerants of a fire of burnout, right? We are in control of those things.
Teresa, before you hop on, one of the things I'm curious about is, knowing that people are looking for some specifics of how we can talk about this, is what would it actually just look like to have a conversation around when are the times of years we have to be mindful and aware, and to really interrogate what is absolutely necessary for us to do. And because I think that one of the things that we see in our work is leaders are afraid to have this conversation with their team members because they're afraid they're going to ask for the moon and they're not going to be able to deliver it. And I wonder, just to share your thoughts on that, of how can we normalize talking about it? And that idea of, you started to talk about how there are times when we might be busy, because I think that's true of most industries. There's cycles of busyness.
Absolutely.
And I wonder if you can talk about what are some of the ways we are trying to think differently, knowing that we can't stop the work because we're in business, but what are some things we're doing to be preventative about it?
Yeah. Okay. So we had 2 questions in there. Good. I'll keep those separate in my brain. No, something I love so much about how might you start or normalize this conversation. Some of the most powerful things we've seen leaders do, and we've seen this firsthand, is sharing when they're feeling a little crispy, right? Sharing like, we've been pushing so hard, I'm feeling it. I can only imagine you're feeling it. Tell me more, right? So normalizing even that kind of conversation where you're owning it. Something I think can be powerful, probably with any group, but if you're on a team or you support a team where numbers are particularly valuable, I have a lot of very quantitative engineering types in my life. And so if I can find a number to go with something, it seems to help unlock the whole conversation. And I want to read this one so I get it right. And this piggybacks on Brandon's. Employees are 70% less likely to experience high burnout when they have enough time to do their work. And so I think even sharing something like that to say, wow, how would we know if we had enough time to do our work? What would that look like? What comes up for you when I share this? And also when I say it out loud and I just hear myself say it, goodness, it's not too much to ask that people would have time to do their work, the very thing they've been hired to do, right? And that workload would not be something that would crush them. So yes, thank you, Sarah, for echoing that. So we've got a stat, we've got normalize when you feel overwhelmed. This is another one that came up. And again, I'm going to read these. I don't have them committed to memory, nor did you expect me to, my friends, because we're all human here. That was from Gallup, the 70%. And Deloitte, this one also got me. So the more power and authority you have in your organization, the more important I think this number could be. But in 2022 into 2023, 80% of executives, so the people with the most power in the organization, thought working conditions were improving, burnout was less, mental health and stability was better for their employees, 80%. Anyone have a guess? Just put it in the chat, friends, if you're tracking along. What was the real number that the employees reported? 80% of the people at the top were like, definitely getting better for them.
Curtis raised his hand.
Oh, good.
But you can put it in the chat, Curtis, if you're okay.
Friends, you are spot on. Yeah, I like all these numbers. Bridget, I'm a solid 5% kind of gal myself. The number they found was about 30%. That's an enormous disconnect, right? Between the folks at the top who are looking, looking down. I'm being cheesy today, but looking out and thinking, oh yeah, things are definitely better for them. And the them is saying about 3 out of 10 of us feel like it's actually better for us, right? So a barrier to solving this problem, certainly the most gracious barrier interpretation is that there's just a disconnect in understanding. I also want to give a shout out as you're looking at this figure that Sarah and I have authored a white paper on burnout that's available on the website under the resources tab, which shares some more statistics, some other sources. So I wanted to make sure I told you about that while we're here. Sarah, did we have a question come in, my friend?
No, it wasn't a question, but you started to talk about this idea of how can we approach this differently and how do we talk about it differently?
Yes.
And I just I want to take a moment because here's an example of a disconnect between an executive and team members in our world.
Yes.
We met last week for our strategic planning session, and this year has been great for me because everyone else is in a different role, but it never occurred to me that this was going to feel like a more of a push for Teresa and Amy because they were stepping into different roles. So while it felt good to me because it wasn't just me doing it all, it was a different level of energy and push to them. Also recognizing that in our organization, I forget the additional pressure that they might feel in representing me versus how I feel in just representing me. So that's an example of how easy this disconnect can happen. It isn't, and I am somebody who am trying to create a company that is very human focused, and that disconnect can happen. But I wonder if you can talk about some of the recent conversations we've had around resourcing ourselves, or are you going to talk about that later around busy times?
Yes. And Sarah, please help me remember the names of our friends who gave us the gift of this phrase. Resourcing.
First name is Shantae.
Shantae, yes.
Yeah, from the Norfolk.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We had a great conversation with some colleagues who we hope to work more with because they were delightful in every possible way. Shantae, so I want to give her a shout out. And she said they've switched their conversations to how do we resource ourselves? And that language shift was important for her and for their group because they felt like self-care kind of felt, oh, oh, maybe something that could be put off, or maybe something that was superficial. They might do things for self-care that were maybe not recharging their batteries, or that it was an additional thing they had to do. And Sarah, you chime in because you may remember other details from that, but that's one of the things that stuck out to me. And so this idea of resourcing yourself. So one way that we heard, I'm pointing over here like, yes, she's just right over here.
I know.
So one way that touched me was when we were having our conversation, kind of a year in review and thinking forward. And again, we have seasons that are just very busy. It's good that we have very busy seasons, and we also need to have very busy seasons. And so the conversation was less about, how do we just stop having busy seasons, right? This is a business. This is what we do. I'm sure you can relate to that with time frames and deadlines that you have. But more importantly, how can we better resource ourselves during these busy times? Because we got really good at, and so, I'm sharing just examples from our team. We got really good at normalizing a recovery day. And that might mean a day without meetings after you've had some back-to-backs. It might mean, half a day off to go to Target and just, get all your supply. It could mean whatever you wanted it to be. And so clearly the Target one is my example. But we got really good at thinking about taking a little time away to just breathe. But then we started thinking, how do we structure up? If we know people are going to be working a lot, what might it look like to have lunch brought in a couple days during that time? What might it look like for, fill in the blank with what would feel meaningful to you. So we started thinking of it more in, if the expectation is high, how are we going to structure up to that? Knowing that in some moments we can't lower it. We maybe can't defer work to where we want it to go. I can't say, oh, about this webinar, sorry, it's actually going to be January 15th. That's much better, right? Like there are some days that are just firm. So how do we resource up to match that? And something that Sarah and I talked about last week, we often hear this idea, we're moving so fast, we can't take care of the people. And we want to push back on that because the cultures we serve, who are often saying we're just too busy to care for the people, don't value caring for the people anyway. Yeah. So if you're hearing things come up about moving so fast, I want to invite you to step into that, like knowing we're moving this fast, how do we structure up? Oh, Brandon, as always, yes. Resourcing yourselves. Brandon, you are the best co-pilot in this session today. The job demands and resource theory. I love a good academic connection there. Yes. Personal demands and how they fluctuate in our lives, regardless of what is happening in the workplace. Yes. And I think even understanding, right, and taking a moment to consider that no two people are having the same experience, right? I'm the only one on our core team who has a family at home, right? I mean, I don't mean that. I mean children. I'm caring for children. I have a family. Nick, I know that you're family. I want to own that that wasn't what I intended to come out. I'm the only person raising kids who are my own right now, right? And so like, I have a different set of demands that fluctuate outside, and having some flexibility. When we go back to the burnout recipe, I have some flexibility. I have some autonomy. I have a high level of control within some parameters about how my work gets done, right? And that's made a huge difference for me. Yeah. Thank you for that, Brandon. I want to do this. I want to go to burnout phases. And this comes from our colleague. So yes, thank you, Nick. From a colleague, Carlin Donnelly. And if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to this episode of the podcast, Conversations on Conversations, it's a good one. And Sarah, I'm going to invite you after I share these phases to share some of those insights. But phases of burnout. Now, friends, this is where I want you to really key into the fact that this is progressive, that we might be able to catch it, and that this would be preventable. And I think going back to how do we normalize, I want to do some normalizing here as we go along. The first phase is honeymoon, right? You've got a new job, you've got a new position, you've got a new responsibility of some kind. You know the responsibility is higher, you know the stress is a bit higher, but also you're down for it. You're like, I've got this. I'm feeling real good. You're excited. You're just kind of riding the high. We've all working a lot, but it's okay. That's kind of the summary there of the honeymoon. Then we go into healthy coping. I'm feeling the stress, but I've got lots of tools, right? I go to breakfast with my friend. I like to exercise. I watch funny shows and just feel great. I'm baking a pie. I've just got all these healthy coping things. I'm snuggling with my dog, who clearly thinks I'm the best person in the world. So I've got lots of healthy coping. So like, I'm feeling the stress, but I'm managing it. I'm coping with it pretty well. Now here's where we start to teeter a little bit, right? Numbing. The healthy coping, the stuff that, I'm exercising, I'm meeting a friend, I'm, drawing, I'm thinking of all the different things humans might want to do. Those aren't cutting it anymore. It's coming up short. We're still feeling like something has to give. And the numbing, right? We think about things we want to do to numb. We might just binge shows, right? So instead of I'm watching a show, I'm laughing, I'm blowing off some steam, you can think of this too. Something that I connected with as we go down these phases is that the human becomes increasingly passive, becomes kind of increasingly defeated, right? And you can see the connection between that and kind of your sense of efficacy or your sense of power going away. So numbing, the healthy coping is not working, right? We might be drinking more. We might have disordered eating, right? It could manifest many different ways. Be on the lookout, friends. And Sarah, you echo these in the chat because I was reflecting on this for myself. If I could get better at catching when I am entering numbing, I think that would be a powerful catch for me. So I want to own that. So the particular phrases associated here with numbing, be on the lookout for lack of sleep or changes in your sleep. Maybe changes in your heart rate, changes in your blood pressure throughout the day, feeling exhausted, right? This is where we're starting to feel like I'm getting a full night's sleep and it's not cutting it anymore. I want you to be on the lookout for that. One of the key distinctions here in the numbing phase is that we are very aware on some level there's a problem and we're ignoring our body's signals. That's a key distinction of numbing. And this is how it's shown up for me. Gosh, it was pandemic. I was balancing work, which I enjoyed, and my kids were not in school. They were schooling remotely, right, during that time. And I had a lot of balls in the air, right? I'm very much in that sandwich phase of life where I'm caring for older relatives and people in my house, and trying to care for younger people and trying to keep myself going as well. And I knew I could feel it. I was like, and I was moving a little into numbing. I was binging shows. I was doing some other things, that I probably didn't need to do, shouldn't have been doing. It should have been a clue for me that things were getting out of the realm that I could cope with, right? And this is how ignoring that phase has shown up for me. So think about changes in your own body, right? Because these can be really personal. We're all wired a little bit differently, but I started having real chronic stomach aches that turned into, do we have any medical people on here? Acute gastritis. And the way I liked to explain it to people was, I ignored the stress. I ignored the signals for so long. My body was like, I'm just going to toss a grenade down in her tummy and then we'll really get her attention, right? And so it took about 6 weeks to recover from just this terrible feeling that my stomach was on fire constantly. And again, when I learned about these phases, I'm like, that's where it was. I was ignoring all of the signs. I just kept going. That's something I want to call out. Maybe it's our culture. Maybe it's, I assume it's culture, right? But maybe we're wired this way too, of like, I can persevere, I can keep going. Oh, don't even make me say something like rise and grind. These are perpetual or like progressive. So we can't just magically make them go away. right? There is no spontaneous recovery from burnout. I see the recovery as more like working yourself back one phase at a time. I can certainly say that's what happened to me when I got to the phase when my stomach was on fire. And that's how I lovingly refer to it. I had to get back to healthy coping. And then I could get back to like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm doing it. I'm managing it, right? You can't go from extreme burnout to feeling, like a newly hatched robin overnight. That's just not how this works, right? Good. I'm cracking Nick up back here. We're a little wild today. We're excited. Exhaustion. Friends, it's just like what it sounds like. No coping is working. You're exhausted. And the thing that makes exhaustion a little different than numbing, right? Because we're feeling it physically and numbing. When we hit the exhaustion phase, that's when we really experience the mental stuff that comes along with it, right? Feelings of guilt, shame, incompetence, feeling worthless, feeling like I used to be great, now I'm a hack. I used to be great, now I barely function. Those feelings really come into play with exhaustion. So again, I'm spending a lot of time on this because I want you to become really aware with how these can show up. And again, you know yourself, and you can keep reflecting on what shows up for you in these phases. How will you monitor yourself to think like, I've reached for that bottle 5 days in a row after work. Am I numbing, right? Like, what am I doing right now? Or, the Oreos or whatever it shows up. I have binge watched 4 seasons of The Crown today. I've doom scrolled, classic numbing, just scrolling, right? And then the last phase, habitual burnout, right? This is when, and I say this with love, folks just completely break down, right? This is when folks are having trouble getting out of bed. They're not functioning. One watch out, and it's a little bit like high functioning depression, maybe. You can experience most of these and mask them at work. And that's what the majority of people are doing the majority of the time, right? They're masking because the risks can feel so high. The risk that, again, you'll be perceived that you can't take it, that you're not as passionate, that you're not as driven, that you're not whatever. But these are very normal human things that we experience. So yeah, so the habitual burnout. And also, this is where it can be a little dangerous. And I'm speaking with love here. We can lose a sense of what even matters in the world anymore, right? So do you see how it goes from like, I'm feeling stress, I'm dealing with it, I'm feeling it, but I don't want to feel it. So I'm going to disconnect a little bit. I'm exhausted, and now I'm feeling bad about myself and how I'm showing up, to like, I don't even know what matters, right? Like, I'm kind of apathetic. I'm just withdrawn. And you can see why these phases matter to you as individuals and to the teams you serve, because first of all, we don't want people to experience this, and it could be dangerous for them, right? Like, this is something we need to really step into, to care about, to normalize talking about. We had a very busy season this spring, and I was like, I got this. And I think I'm programmed not to notice until I'm almost to exhaustion. And then I'm like, oh, come to think of it. And my body, it's so creative. I have a very creative body. And it was like, what'll get her attention? A rash on her face. And it took months to rein this back in. And it was caused by stress, right? And so, and I will say, in the spirit of masking it, I didn't miss a beat. I mean, Sarah can chime in here. I was on time. My deadlines were met. I was showing up. I was giving. And the inside felt very spicy, very spicy. And then the rash happened. So you might have other physical manifestations like that show up for you that might not have happened to you yet. Hopefully you will learn from the experience of Teresa Peterson to pay attention to those phases of burnout. So my friends, I want to normalize it right now. And I want to ask, where are you right now? Where are you right now? We'll go back to mentee 4792-5037. Where are you right now? And again, in the interest of increasing safety, we are using this anonymously. I will be honest, we've been going pretty hard, and I was probably, when I self-assessed, I was probably in the boundary of healthy coping and numbing.
Yeah.
You know, I was probably really walking that line. And I probably did a little more numbing than I would care to admit, but we are all friends here and there is no shame. So here we go. Now, isn't this beautiful? And we've still got, oh, I love these like up to the minute statistics. But look at this and let's just enjoy this. Oh, bless it. You know what? Thank you for your honesty to everyone completing this poll, and especially to those of us who said and had the courage to say, hey, actually, I'm over here. So let's take a look. Honeymoon phase, only 9%. Healthy coping, about 43. And friends, if you're in honeymoon or healthy coping, you dial up your radar, right? Oh yes, Adelia. Oh, Anadelia, thank you. I wish there was a transition back to healthy coping. Something that came up for me, and then we'll talk about our stats coming in here for just a minute. Something that came up for me was this awareness that I couldn't just get back to where I was. I couldn't just get back to the honeymoon or to healthy. I had to scale back. It's like you've just got to walk it back. That was something that helped me think about it differently, because I could kind of beat myself up, like, why can't I just, you know, any sentence that starts, why can't I just? So I would invite everyone to think about it in terms of just scaling it back. Oh yeah, I'm sure you can jump from honeymoon to exhaustion. Yeah. I think in this beautiful game of life, Burnout Edition, you can jump forward almost.
I was going to say,
degrees.
Nick and I were reflecting on a job I had right out of college.
Oh, good.
That I was with for 2 months. That was it.
Oh.
And I went from honeymoon to habitual burnout in 2 months.
Oh, yes.
2 months.
Because
it was such a toxic environment.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, because we see cultures firsthand that take someone just shining bright like the sun and they turn into Oscar the Grouch. You know, in the span of 2 months, they are deflated, right? That those are burnout cultures. So there's this misconception that it's only someone who's been doing it a long time. Like, those are all misconceptions. But yes, I want to honor that. Yes, you can jump ahead. So yeah, thank you, Nick. Back to, I would be remiss if I didn't call out, this is a snapshot in early December. And we know holidays for many people are even more taxing, right? So I'm looking at my numbing, exhaustion, and habitual burnout friends. We're going to share some practices in a moment, particularly for the women on the webinar who carry a disproportionate load of the household, of the children wrangling, of the presents for nieces and nephews, of the cooking. Those are things I'm thinking about, right? When I look at these stats of, we're going to share some practices, and I really want to invite you to think about, how can I start walking it back? And you'll hear me a few times refer to it as walking it back, because unfortunately, there's no like ripcord and a parachute out of this situation. And I want to highlight that too, because sometimes people feel like if I just quit X, it would all get better. And you might be in a situation that is unsafe, friends, and that might be true for you. What is true in the majority of cases is that those feelings pile on when we're overextended, right? Yes, thank you, Sarah. And your body can hold stress for at least 2 years. So that idea of walking it back is very important. Nick, let's pull up our practices. Yes, thank you for that shocked face emoji on that stat. The first thing we've been talking about throughout, but this idea of checking in with yourself. Now that you're more aware of phases of burnout, be really honest with yourself, whether that's in writing, how is it that you best hear your own voice? I have a colleague who journals. I have a friend who records videos of herself that are just for her. I know people who just park in their car in the driveway and refuse to go in the house for about 2 minutes to just sit and be with her own thoughts. I've heard of all these types of strategies. So checking in with yourself, how am I really, right? How do I know? And thinking about raising your awareness of those signs. I don't have any easy answers on this one, but I know I'm working on thinking, how do I monitor when I flipped from healthy coping to numbing? Because for me, the switch from numbing to exhaustion feels like about 2 days, right? By the time I'm used to noticing it, I'm toast. So how do I get better at that in between? This concept of nurturing what you want to grow probably has roots in a lot of places, but for Sarah and I in this work, it comes from this body of work called appreciative inquiry. Nurture what you want to grow. One of the most common traps people fall into is they start withdrawing from things they enjoy when they're getting into numbing because they're feeling the energy decline. They're feeling a little bit of that sense of closing off to the world. Remember, this process of burnout is about backing away, is about feeling less in control and less connected. So nurture what you want to grow. The things I know on my list, maybe meeting up with a friend, maybe going for a walk, things that I love to do are usually the first things I cut off my list when I'm having trouble prioritizing, when I'm having trouble feeling rested. I think, no, I just need to lay here and do this. And that is almost never what I probably needed to do. So stay keenly connected to what you want to grow. The other thing I would say, and we can bring our list up, Nick, is keep your healthy habits going. It's much less energy for your brain to continue an existing positive habit than to rebuild that habit later. So as much of your energy as you can keep on keeping healthy routines in place, the better. I really want to invite you to monitor your thinking. When we are experiencing those later stages, and I'm thinking exhaustion or later, be on the lookout for binary thinking. That's a telltale sign of a brain under stress. It's a yes or a no. It's red or it's blue. It's everything, it's nothing, right? So if you're noticing a lot of those types of responses, of ideas, of processing, I want you to tune in that stress might be a little higher than you're realizing. The same with, this goes into the bucket we call thought distortions, right? Which would be that catastrophic thinking, that everything is out of control, that everything is terrible, nothing can be solved, right? I'll just kind of lay here and waste away. Those are certainly all things I have probably thought this year, as a matter of fact. Here's our next one. In an effort to regain that self-efficacy, to regain what's in your control, we have to ask ourselves, what is still in my control? And how have I handled this in the past? What has worked for me? Sarah and I are big fans of this idea. What's your manual? What do you know about yourself? What is actually still within your control? Because when we're under stress, when we're in exhaustion or those later phases, we're losing our sense of efficacy. We're losing our sense of power. We're becoming increasingly apathetic and withdrawn. So really putting in front of ourselves what is within my control is essential. And then here's our last one. And you'll love this. You got to make some tough decisions. And this is how this has shown up for me. And these might push against your person, how you grew up. This might push against your culture. What could be done at 80%, right? We often start thinking about, what don't I need to do anymore? Well, if it were that easy, we probably would have thrown that stuff overboard already. But what could I do at 80%? Some other questions that I've had to ask myself, because actually, I think this was last fall. I was in a situation where in isolation, I enjoyed all the pieces. but together it was adding up to way over commitment, way too much. I'd spread myself too thin. And truthfully, I had done that to myself by overcommitting to things, which could be a whole other webinar topic. And if you're interested in it, well, we'll do it next year. So chime in. But some of the questions I started to ask myself, what would I regret the least? If I had to get rid of something on this list, what would I regret the least? The flip side of that I asked myself, what could I tolerate the most? Right? Of a few things I didn't want to do, which one was most tolerable, right? When I really got down to it. And this one, I use this with my kids a lot too. How long will this matter? So if there's something on my list I'm unsure about, something weighing on me, I like to pause and ask myself, how long will this matter? Is this a 1 day? Is this a 1 week? One thing I have found for myself, and again, these are all very, there's a huge range of normal and there are a huge range of things in front of us, but things almost never are as big of a deal for as long of amount of time as I think they're going to be. So again, these are strategies very much focused on you as the individual, right? Now, could some of these be transferred to your team? Absolutely. But something that helped me regain my sense of control was that feeling of making some tough decisions when I was faced with a lot of things I didn't want to give up, but I knew something had to give because, well, my stomach was on fire and then my face was in a rash. So, oh, it's all fun and games now. Friends, we are at the end of our time, and I know Sarah and I feel the same. An hour with you goes so quickly. As our last minute reflection, I want to just give you a chance to share in the chat, and maybe you're taking your last few bites of your chicken sandwich and you're down to just the ice and your lemonade, Matt, but share in the chat just one of these. But how has your understanding of burnout evolved during our 1 hour together today? And what's something you'll do new or differently to support burnout in yourself and others? Yeah, Stephanie, that it's progressive. That was a light bulb for me. I don't know. That was truly a new thing. Yeah, dipping a toe into numbness, Sarah. Yeah, just noticing when the signpost says numbing straight ahead. Yeah, Amanda, thank you. Leadership vulnerability. Normalize it, talk about it, and talk about it being preventable, right? And if it's not entirely preventable, we can prevent it from getting to those almost dangerous places, right? That it can manifest physically. Yes, it's so important to realize. Checking in more with myself and checking my inner thoughts. It's okay to be human. Community is important, even at work. Yes, community is incredibly important for humans, right? We're social creatures. I like the questions. What would I regret? I mean, and I'm with you, Lori. Those are tough questions. They're not easy to answer, but I have found them to be really helpful in getting power back. And that's a whole theme when you look at recovering from burnout, is reclaiming some power. So again, those are questions that have worked for me. I'm glad they're resonating. Yeah, different phases. Thank you, Craig. I now have a name and a face together. Yeah, being more self-aware and observant of others, right? Like normalize sharing that with your teams, in your household. I think about that even with like overcommitted young people, right? Young people spread too thin. How might this knowledge be helpful for them? Thank you, Brandon. Integrating it. Showing empathy to others. Yes. Yes. And better recognizing for myself. Phases look different for different people. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, yes. Oh, this is a gold star close. Phases might look different, really different with other people. I get a burst of energy even when I'm numbing, and that can be misleading. You know what I love about that? First of all, oh, good. Mary gave you a cookie, and that's about the highest honor you can get in the Sarah Noel Wilson Inc. world. 2 cookies. Well, one for me and one for you, Anna Delia. Yes, it can look different for other people. And the things we reach, the things we go to mask or to tell ourselves, no, just do more, just get over this hump. are defeating, right? So when we think of it as stair steps, we have to watch that what we're not trying to tell ourselves to just push through, we actually need to be scaling back. Which is tricky, all right? And that's not a message that we get often in our culture. American culture is very driven by the individual and work and all those things that can actually get in the way of being our best selves and our whole selves. Friends, thank you for spending this hour talking about burnout.
Well done, Teresa.
It's been a pleasure as always. If you have topics you would love to see for next year, please reach out. The burnout white paper is available on the website for you. Let us know if you have an issue finding it. Highly recommend the interview that Sarah did with Caroline, who is a burnout prevention specialist. So if you think, I want to know a little more, I would highly point you in her direction. It's been an absolute pleasure. Happy end of the year. We will see you in 2024. That doesn't even sound like a real year in my brain. 2024. Thank you, friends. Take care of yourselves. And take care of yourselves with some weird dancing, some 80s dance moves. Shopping cart.
Yeah.
I could do the pencil sharpener, but you can't really.